I'm Jim Carney.
I'm Linda Hirsch.
And this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
There are many intractable problems in the world today, with tensions often flaring up into wars. As adults, we haven't been especially skilled at meeting these challenges, but a group of 4th and 5th graders playing a special game has found solutions, and in the process, they may teach us all about achieving a world of collaboration rather than conflict. Today, educator and author John Hunter joins me to discuss his book, World Peace and Other 4th Grade Achievements. My guest today is John Hunter, acclaimed teacher and the author of World Peace and Other 4th Grade Achievements. Mr. Hunter shared a vision for achieving a more peaceful world at TED, the Pentagon, and the UN. Welcome to EdCast, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Linda, for having me.
What is the World Peace Game, and why play it?
The World Peace Game, it's a huge thing. It's a 4-foot by 4-foot by 4-foot plexiglass tower. It towers over my 9-year-olds that play it in my classroom in Virginia. It's a geopolitical simulation, and 4 country teams, 4 nations, play against each other to solve 50 interlocking global problems. They try to do it without combat if possible. We read Sun Tzu's The Art of War, 2,500-year-old manual of how to get out of war or avoid it altogether. And it's almost impossible to do, but the students for the last 35 years have somehow managed to solve these global problems in a reasonable way, so much so that adults are now asking, how do you do that?
What are some of the problems that you present them with? Before I ask you to even give us a specific scenario, what kinds of world issues are you asking them to confront?
We've got ethnic, religious, and minority rights difficulties, refugee problems, chemical, nuclear, and toxic waste spills, water rights problems, overpumping of aquifers, desertification, runaway and breakaway republics, famine, endangered species, pollution, oil spills, you name it, we put it in. We rip it from the headlines, so to speak, and then modify it for the appropriate insertion into this game. And everything is interdependent. If you solve one, or try to solve one problem, everything else is affected simultaneously.
Can you describe a typical scenario or one particular kind of problem that the kids might have to deal with?
Sure. I really had to think hard of how to relate, not only in subject areas, relate all the subject areas together, but relate areas of different parts of world policy and economics. So one example would be an endangered species, a microscopic species, is discovered on a remote island of a very poor country. And it's discovered right at the site where a huge oil deposit seems to be underneath. Now, if this poor country, which needs the revenue, drills the oil, they will most likely eliminate that species. And so the neighboring country happens to be very ecologically minded. They refuse to allow the drilling. In fact, they invade that country's territorial waters, circle their ships around the island, and won't even let the country drill on its own land. And the people are starving. And other countries get involved, vying for rights to the drilling and vying against it. And so we've got a huge complex problem with many parties with good intentions, all working against each other, it appears. And they've got to sort of figure out how to undo that situation.
It sounds like there are similarities here to the real world for sure.
Yes.
We've been able to obtain some footage from you from a film done by Chris
Wonderful.
Farina, in which we can actually listen to the kids engage in solving some of these problems. So let's take a look.
Hey guys, quest tags, take your seats in your cabinet.
And it was made over 1,000 years ago.
There has to be a way we can use this. We have to figure that out. We can use this volcano, use this eruption to make something good happen.
We have started a counterattack and sending its air force.
Oh God. If you look on the World Peace Game map, he has like that much oil.
So does Caden. And Caden's our complete ally. And we can also get some oil from him.
Okay.
We're not going to.
Like Caden said you would.
Caden, we're not going to attack them. I know. It's a threat. He did say that. All the ships that we moved was for confusion, and it wasn't for battle, and that we come in peace.
First, I gave him 7 days to do something about the microscopic organisms, and he's now 2 days left, and He hasn't even boarded the island and tried to do anything about it, and I think he's trying to attack me instead of trying to do what he said he was going to do. It's a game that makes you think really hard. It makes you really think about what's really going on in the world.
What I think is you can't be all about war, and you can't be, again, this may sound bad, but you can't be all about peace.
Yeah, not like all like flowers and grassy fields and
Last year
solar
our-
panels and
last year-
houses. No, it's not like that. You'll have to have some defense.
It's challenging. There is no right or wrong answer. If you wanted a right answer, choose the one that helps everyone and then think about yourself.
We've really had enough of people attacking. I mean, we've been lucky. I mean, the time, now I'm feeling really weird because I'm living what Sun Tzu said 1 week. 1 week he said, those who go into battle and win and will want to go back, and those who lose in battle will want to go back and win. And so I've been winning battles, so I'm sort of going into battles, more battles. And I think it's sort of weird to be living what Sun Tzu said.
This session of the World Peace Game is about to commence. Because I have such confidence in you, I'm going to do something I've never done before. What? The game has 3 new crises in it. I've never put new crises in once the game has started. These are crises concerning water rights. One of the big problems in the world today is people having enough clean water for whatever they need, drinking and washing and so forth. It's a big problem. And guys, I really think they're going to be almost impossible to get out of. But I really have confidence you're going to be able to do it. I don't know why I think you can. So I would never do this if I didn't think you could. But I don't know how you're going to do it. I cannot imagine. So good luck to you.
I'm sorry, but I'm okay, but I really need to talk to Joe.
First Connor, then you.
Mr. Hunter, he's a brain stretcher. My brain, when I come from his classroom, it just feels like it's just like empty. If I shake my head around, I can feel it swishing.
My brain, when I come back from his class, it feels like it's just
jelly.
Learned so much.
This session of the World Peace Game is about to commence.
I hope that they never need me again, that I put myself out of a job, that they have everything that they could possibly have gotten from this experience, from me, from my influence, whatever it might have been, and that they take away every tool, every creative thinking tool, every critical thinking tool they can, and they have a confidence that they can solve any problem, they can deal with anything.
One of the things I learned was that other people matter. In this game, one person can't win, everyone has to win. And I think that taught me a lot about cooperating with other people, being generous, and having an attitude that if you work together, you can achieve anything.
Now, they are so engrossed and engaged. What strikes you about the process that these kids go through when they solve these problems?
Oh, well, you know, I think allowing them the space and the luxury to explore and to fail. Failure is really a part of life, and we have, in some parts of our culture, a moral stigma against being incorrect. So they're allowed to try and fail without that fear of failing, and therefore they can really grow in creativity and take risks that they wouldn't normally take. And the game starts with them inheriting situations on the verge of chaos and combat, and they don't know how to solve these problems. I don't know how to solve them. When I invented the game, the idea is that they will somehow discover that, and they discover right away through despair and failure that they need each other, and they discover collaboration without me having to teach it or to preach it. And that's a beautiful evolution.
That's amazing. Is their initial approach, you know, we just saw a brief snapshot, which was fascinating. Based on your experience, is there Is there a typical response when kids begin this process? Do they begin more aggressively at first? Do they take more of a, we got to win this kind of attitude? What happens in general? I know you can't say each time is
sure.
different, but is there an approach that children use when they begin to tackle these
Well,
problems?
I have played the game with adults, and there's an entirely different
Okay,
approach
so let's
children
talk
do
about
take.
that difference. What do you see
Well,
as different?
children come in more open-minded, more wide open, more admitting to not knowing, and not carrying the baggage of preconceived ideas and perspectives that they've inherited. So they have a fresher approach and are willing to explore. Adults, they have more history, they have more experience, they have experienced perspectives that they use and are used to, and those things actually inhibit you when you go into the unknown, situations where you cannot apply conventional, traditional, or past habits and values. So I'm trying to strip away the conventions that children would lean on even, and give them a chance to freshly explore the unknown without that preconception, those preconceived ideas.
And I know we've talked about these being real world situations. Are the children aware when they're solving these problems that these are really very real problems coming out of real world events that we could open the newspaper and take a look?
They may if they're in tune with that, but you know, sometimes we had an example, there are random cards in the game. Our weather goddess pulls random events. We had tsunamis. One country kept pulling the tsunami card, and hitting their nuclear reactors is what happened. And it was just about the time the Fukushima incident happened in Japan. So the next day after that came on the news, my students came in very somberly and sat down, and one said, "Mr. Hunter, we're pulling these tsunami cards. Did we cause what happened in Japan?" Causal relationship
that's
connection.
fascinating.
And of course, we explained, but they blur the lines between reality and fiction, and they really feel like they're trying to save the real world through this exercise.
Maybe it wouldn't hurt all of us to have a little bit more of that feeling.
I hope so.
You mentioned the Art of War, the Sun Tzu book, and I know you've been asked this question before. A book about war, what's its role in a game about peace? Why this book?
Well, the students actually introduced me to this, and so we all agreed together to use it. It seems to be a book about how to avoid war or get out of it quickly with the least amount of damage and suffering to the population. And so this general understood that war is a vicious cycle, and you cannot remain in that and survive and be healthy as a nation. So he was trying to see more deeply into that process, which seemed, I guess, to him to be a part of human nature, and to manage that better so that people thrive, even if they must go through it. Let's get through it, get this out of the way, and return to prosperity somehow. So it's a manual on how to survive difficult and hard times and decisions, I think. And the students take to it like a fish to water. It's amazing. They read their little pocket versions of it at lunchtime on the playground and recess. It's
The Art of
amazing to
War
see.
must
Yeah.
be very reassuring to an
9-year-olds.
outsider.
Imagine.
So let's talk a little bit then about the kids. When you introduce the game, how do you teach them to play the game? If I wanted to do something like this, how would I teach them to play this game? Or do you, or just throw the problem at them?
Well, you know,
What's
they come
the
in cold.
process?
They come in completely with no preparation whatsoever. I think that's best. The game is so complex, they're thrown in the deep end. It's sink or swim. And that urge to survive and that desperation to succeed compels them to join together to survive, and they help each other that way. There's a 25-page dossier we have to go through. It takes about an hour and a half to go through. 13 pages of crises in a crisis document. 3 hours it takes to get through this. They're overwhelmed. The left brain, the analytical side shuts down. It's too much information. And so they're thrown into the intuitive. When they start, they're faltering. They don't know what to do. They stumble, they fail, there's despair, and that's intended. And through that, because of our loving relationship together, they're able to survive and weather that storm and start to pick up steam and make experimental efforts to solve problems, and they start doing it.
Do you see a spillover from their group collaboration in this game to other aspects of their own lives after they do this?
I do. You know, one of the most heartwarming things for me as a teacher is when they come back. You know, when they leave your room, you may never see them again. So in the last few years, students who played the game 15, 20, 30 years ago have come back through social media, and they tell me what effect this game had on their lives.
Can you share with us a little bit about that? I'm really curious about that.
Sure.
What have they said?
There was one girl, Irene was her name, and I got a letter from her not too long ago. She's a let's see, War and Peace Studies major in International Security and Diplomacy Issues at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill.
Did you inspire that? Was her experience with
Well,
this
she
game?
says so. She
Yeah.
was watching the TED Talk and she said, I started crying because I remembered that you allowed me, Mr. Hunter, to be a black market arms dealer. You allowed me to defy the UN. My parents came in and watched. They were worried about me. They were concerned. But the game allows you to create whatever reality you want and learn experientially through the consequences of what's the best thing to do. Now she's a policy major, and she says, I get tingling in my fingers when I have to deal with international diplomacy issues, and my professors wonder, how come I'm so good at doing it? She says, well, I've been doing diplomacy since I was 9.
Amazing.
Of course I can.
I solved world peace in 4th grade.
I know, what's the problem
This
here?
is easy. Going back to that though, you know, part of the book talks about how there are certain roles that you throw into the mix here, and you have the role of the saboteur, which I think is really interesting. And so let's talk about that first.
Yeah.
Why the role of the saboteur, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, early on, the first few years of the game, the students were getting good at it, and they would solve problems very quickly. And even sometimes they would say, we don't have to have a war at all, let's just all sign a peace treaty. And so I knew the thinking had to go deeper.
If it's any academic meetings.
Yes. So I said, let's use human nature. Let's look at the negative side, the dark side of things. The student who's usually the troublemaker, the one who's always in the principal's office, you know, that's the kid I want. So I go and I said, if you're always in the principal's office for trouble, you're very creative, because if you're in here all the time, that's a lot of creativity. I like to use your skill set. I like to put your skill set into the game to help us go deeper into critical thinking. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to try and win the game, to solve all 50 interlocking problems, raise every country's asset value so everybody wins. Publicly, you're doing that. But underneath, through ambiguities, irrelevancies, misinformation, misdirection, you can't lie, but just sort of imagine and sort of make it be. You can have a few mercenaries and some ICBMs, a couple $1 million. You can let me move for you, and you can be in secret. I want you to destroy the entire game. Everybody knows you're in the room. Everybody knows you're working against them. They don't know who it is. But the critical thinking means that every student has to then examine everything that happens as many ways as they can from every angle that they can, because appearances are completely deceiving.
It's almost like a spy novel. How do the kids respond to that? Do they try to figure out who is that person?
Yes,
do they try to expose that person?
Yes, we even have a trial. You can have an accusation. If you're wrong, I think it's a $50 million fine for slander or libel. And if you're right, you get awarded $50 million. The saboteur stops. But at the end of the game, they all always celebrate and congratulate and reward the saboteur for making the game harder and more fun.
That's fascinating.
It's amazing.
You mentioned also there's a section in the book about how the kids have to stand up to a tyrant. Now that is certainly something very real world. What do the kids learn about that? And how do they do that?
Well, in this particular instance that's in the book here, Jared is a bully. He's known school-wide as being a bully. And I, for some reason, had an intuition that he would be a good leader. I think I was wrong, because I chose him to be a leader of a country, which means he had tremendous power. I thought maybe that responsibility would help him to develop compassion and be more caring. I was completely wrong. He began to bully. And he did so much of that so well in victimizing the others in a formal way in the game. This is my game, but he's destroying it. There's nothing I can do about it. And he decides he's going to take over all the countries. He defeats them all except for one, absorbs their entire cabinets into his cabinets. He's got 15 kids behind him, and he's going after the last country. And my heart is breaking as a teacher. I don't know what to do. I can't stop him. It's their game. They have to do what they can do creatively and collectively. So suddenly, a little girl stands up and says, I'd like to have a coup d'etat attempt against Jared. We're all shocked. You can have a coup anytime you want. The game stops. The coin toss that determines the outcome is weighted in the tyrant's favor. He has more power. This little girl, Amy, she lost. Broke my heart again. Gloom settles over the room. She picks up her little sweater and lunchbox and trudges off to seek asylum with that last country. It's the only place to go. Jared's disturbed. Nobody ever challenges him. He is the victimizer. He gets ready to continue with his conquest, and another child stands up. I want to have a coup d'etat attempt. Jared is beside himself. He's the top dog. Nobody ever challenges him. He gets away with it. So that coup failed. Another child, I want to have a coup d'etat. Jared is undone. 6 attempts later, Jared is taken down, and he has to go seek asylum in The children were so gracious, they offered him a low-level policy position to help save the world and get things straight. And I don't know if that changed his personality entirely, but that day, the victims were empowered in a different way, in a formal way, that was sanctioned by all, and they made something that was not right.
That's a life lesson if I ever heard one.
I couldn't have created that as a teacher.
So what have the children learned that we as adults still have to learn?
Well, you know, the strange thing is when I first started teaching, I thought they should learn content, skills, knowledge, and information. This was 1978, my first teaching job. And that's certainly true. But what they have taught me through this exercise over decades, 3 decades now, is that perhaps the deeper purpose of education is actually in the quality of person you become. That if you're a compassionate person and care about others, if you understand how to take care of people and understand the real important things about life that are beyond just knowledge, that there's a wisdom in your actions. And they experience that in the game, and they seem to carry that from the game into their lives, that who they are is as important as what they know. And that idea of compassion for others and decreasing suffering in the world seems to be what they find in the game, and they teach me every time we play it.
And that is something perhaps that we as adults, when we try to solve problems, we lose track of, or we don't keep in the forefront?
Yeah, if we can remember, as the children do, that we're all interrelated, interdependent, we're connected, we're almost like a family, we're relatives. And if we start every decision, every discussion, every argument with at least a little understanding that we are related before we begin, there's maybe a smoother entree, there's a bit of a gentler approach to difficulties with other people if we think that they belong to us.
I can't help but ask, in today's educational climate, it's so accountability driven and standardized test driven, and the kind of learning and the kind of student you're aiming to produce seems to run so counter. What's your feeling about what's going on now, and what would be the place of the World Peace Game?
Well, you know, I have a limited perspective. I'm a small town school teacher. I think that the kind of assessment that the students help me design in this World Peace Game, we design our assessment together, we design our curriculum together. I say to them, boys and girls, here's what we have to do. Here's what we're given to do by the state, by our school. How are we going to do it? I asked them, and suddenly they realized they're being given power over their own lives. And of course I have to weigh in. I'm the teacher, I'm going to help make that decision. But suddenly they are more engaged, and then I say, now, how can everything we decided to do that would work for us, that's driven by your passions, your ideas, your love, how can it all go wrong? How can we fail? And we brainstorm that, we troubleshoot that. So they are deeply engaged before we even begin, because I've conceded power. I'm sharing power with 30 co-teachers, not just 30 students and a teacher now. We're doing this together.
So you think that in some way, even though we're looking so much at standardized testing in the schools today, that we should be making a place for this kind of more of a, I guess, experiential kind of learning? That students are taking away something different, or how do you see that?
Testing, as my good friend Jay McTighe, who's an educational consultant, says, is a snapshot. And what we want is a photo album. We want a portfolio. We want a broader picture. So experiential learning and problem-based learning and things where kids are immersed in an experience where they feel it viscerally, and that experience is driven by their passions and ideals, that makes it so much more, that gives them so much more ownership of their own learning, and to feel the empowerment over your own life of what you know and be able to show that. And the assessment is self-evident, we say. Everybody can see what you know.
We only have a minute left, so I just want to ask you, what's next, and where would you like to see people moving forward?
Well, you know, the lessons of the game say to me, let's develop more compassion. The children say, let's be kinder, let's be nicer, let's share that. And I can't think of a greater lesson through school, through our communities, through our lives. Let's be kinder to each other and help reduce suffering in the world.
I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This has been one of the most interesting conversations that I've had. Thank you so much. Please don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. That was really, really terrific. That was really, really great.
In view of all the crises being solved, and in view of everyone's asset value being over 100 billion, I hereby declare this World Peace Game won!
look at things like the game and what happened with these kids, as I said to them today, if just one of you is in position to leverage something good for the world, just one of you is in that kind of position, that can make all the difference. And if you've picked up a tool from this game, a thinking tool or critical thinking skill that helps you do that, you may save us all. And that's what I'm naively hoping might happen.
Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites.
The Centers for Disease Control has released yet another report that finds no link between childhood vaccines and autism. The new study finds that even multiple vaccines administered at the same time are not linked to autism. Because nearly 1 in 10 parents refuse or delay vaccines due to autism concerns, the CDC feels it is vital to stress the absence of a link to autism so that children will receive inoculations they need to protect their health.
The U.S. government continues to ease up on restrictions for U.S. citizens wishing to study in Cuba. The State Department has issued a written policy stating that academic service providers can receive licenses to offer 4-credit educational programs in Cuba. The stated goal is to provide study abroad options for students whose colleges do not have such programs, but that will grant course credit for formal study in Cuba. All applications from academic service providers will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis.
The French continue to protect their language from English language contamination. Inside Higher Ed reports that the French prefer that their university courses remain offered in French only and not in English. Some educators want the option of teaching courses in English to attract more British and American students. But leading French writers call the proposed change, quote, insulting. And the Académie Française says that any change would, quote, harm the status of the French language in universities.
Social promotion is certainly frowned upon in today's school reform climate. Many educators feel that students should repeat a grade if they are not making sufficient progress, and at least 2 million students are kept back each year. But is retention or repeating a grade a sound strategy? Research indicates it is not effective for improving success and may even have harmful effects. Because poor minority inner-city children have the highest rates of grade retention, researchers stress the need for finding alternatives that will help these children move forward.
Well, c'est la vie, or as the Beatles would say, let it be. That does it for this edition of EdCast.
Until next time, class dismissed.